All right. Claim 6 here is that the 2nd and 3rd century Orthodox leaders were innovators rather than guardians of tradition, creating what is now known as Orthodoxy. So
they just made stuff up.
Yeah. So Jesus was this good guy. He taught some things, loved one another. Then, unfortunately, he died because he was set up as a scapegoat. Although scapegoat has an Old Testament connotation to it.
Yeah.
And so they were like, okay, how do we maintain power or grab power with these new set of ideas? And then they have to inundate it within the scope of New Testament works, the gospel writings.
And then they had to eliminate anything that didn't have that, right? Man. I mean, boy, these people were busy,
yeah.
Right?
And so much so that they were good that no other trace of anything else is ever been
That's
found.
right. That's right.
Okay, so that's the claim. Is it accurate?
Yeah, right. So the actual evidence indicates that the adherents to Orthodoxy in the 2nd century were not innovators, right, but were faithful stewards, passing down the theology offered by the apostolic leaders in the New Testament period.
Right.
That's the way they saw themselves. The rule of faith, which we mentioned earlier, played an important part in maintaining in the church leaders, the 2nd century, the essential convictions of Jesus and the apostles. The rule is found throughout Orthodox writings of the 2nd and 3rd centuries from various geographical locations. So all around the empire, you see the rule of faith in the various writings. Right.
So you can kind of think of this as the early creeds or your catechisms.
Yeah.
So the rule then suggests that the rule of faith suggests that from the beginning of the post-New Testament church, a geographically diverse group of writers had a theological standard that unified them. So you have a church in kind of northern Turkey, you have one in Jerusalem, you have one in Egypt. Well, people over time kind of develop certain different traits and characteristics and emphasis on teachings because what's happening in Egypt isn't what's happening in northern Turkey. So you have different emphasis.
But you did have a core idea,
right.
A rule of faith that they all held to, right?
And so we see this in Paul's letters. He again, he makes this big circuit around a couple times, and he addresses, hey, here's Corinth. Corinth is known as this like Mecca center before Mecca. This Mecca center of like debauchery. So much so that there are like Greek words that if you want to call someone like kind of a really bad name, it's this Greek Corinth term.
Yeah.
And why are they dealing with sexual sins and all this stuff? Well, it's because there's an emphasis on that. And so what does he go back to? He says, here's the gospel, and he lays it out in 1 Corinthians 1. Mm-hmm. Here's the basis of the gospel. Now let me address within the frame of the gospel, within the teachings of Jesus, what the response to this is. Mm-hmm. What did Jesus say? And Paul is continuing that tradition within the scope of the Corinth church, which is different than Ephesians or Ephesus or all these different ones. You see it in Revelation. To the 7 churches, they each are dealing with different things,
different issues. Yeah.
So it's
but there was a core teaching, right? A rule of faith,
right? And if you disavow or pretend not to notice the 1st century church, you miss this.
Yeah.
You miss this,
Yeah.
and you move on to the 2nd century for no particular reason. So in the 2nd century leaders' writings, it is evidence that they saw themselves as handing down these central teachings. So it continued, but now it's meeting up with this Gnostic teaching in specificity. So for the early church, the rule of faith was rooted in the Old Testament prophetic message fulfilled in Jesus and subsequently proclaimed by the authors. The central teachings were then passed on to the fathers, who saw it as their role to pass on rather than invent the apostolic message.
Right. So they were passers-on, not inventors, right?
Right. And so I'll refer to another Michael J. Kruger book, as we have been for this chapter. Question the Canon. So it's talking about how the apostles aren't just writing for the sake of, well, this seems like a good idea. He makes the argument that they're continuing the tradition that the prophets and that God made the early kings and prophets do, which was write down God's words in the form of this kind of covenant factor of you're making an agreement between God and man. And so you're by adhering to this voluntary contract, you're entering into this relationship. And the apostles are kind of this these scribes who are forming the agreement on behalf of God. And so it's a really good book. Probably maybe one of Kruger's lesser known ones that I see cited, but one that is equally fascinating. And so it's not just the apostles are writing for the sake of writing. It's coming from a tradition of a Jewish, Hebraic, Israelite background, that the holy books were laid up in the temple. They were viewed as authoritative. They were viewed as God's word. They were viewed as unchanged, unable to be changed from translation to translation. So you had the Jewish scribes take very careful consideration when maintaining the overall passing down, even from a Hebraic language to a Greek language. And so they continued this tradition. It just doesn't form out of nowhere. It just doesn't, this sounds like a good idea.